he has written a book called How the Force Can Fix the World, Lessons on Life, Liberty, and Happiness from a Galaxy Far, Far Away. Mr. Kent, that cover and some of the words you use in that title sound familiar. What's this based on?
This is based on how Star Wars has dominated our cultural commons for almost 4 decades since it originally hit the theaters in 1977, and has given us sort of this piece of pop culture that is unique in that multiple generations, fathers, sons, moms, daughters, grandparents even, can have a conversation about a thing that is going on in pop culture in Hollywood, and everybody just generally kind of knows what we're talking about. You could ask most people, I think, in the casino here at this hotel that we're at today, who is the father of Luke Skywalker? And a lot of people will know. And I basically have this premise in the book that that's actually very special. You know, that's a very special thing in any culture, to have a shared story of any kind. And that's what this book is about.
So how does that fix the world?
Well, it fixes the world one person at a time by reminding us of Star Wars' core virtues of humility, empathy, redemption, free will, and courage. And if we try to actually take these movies seriously as suggestions on how we should probably live, then we will actually be able to go out into the world and do great things. I was actually doing yoga this morning, and the yoga instructor, because we're at a political conference here, he told everybody, you need to all remember and get centered and comfortable with the idea that you can't go and change the world and tell people about your ideas and fix anything until you've started to work on yourself. And that's why we're here today. And I actually was like, that's what my book's about. That's what Star Wars has always been to me. When Yoda said, do or do not, there is no try, and Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn said, your focus determines your reality, that actually stuck with me. And I actually went, okay, well then I'm going to try to focus on things that matter, because I want my reality to be good. So this is kind of how we adjust this message and kind of look at Star Wars as a way to live.
You compare Star Wars to Shakespeare.
A little bit.
Work us through that.
Well, Star Wars is like Shakespeare in the sense that the references are just baked into our culture in so many ways that we are unconsciously aware of. I think one good example, just for Star Wars in particular, because my whole idea for this book started by interviewing congressmen and senators who happen to be Star Wars fans, and talked about basically, what do you think about Star Wars as sort of like a guide for morality? And they were like, well, you know, we need to be wary of the dark side. The dark side, what does that even mean? What does it mean to be wary of the dark side? But most people are familiar with that little reference, that line, the concept of a light and dark. Star Wars is actually very much to thank for that. Shakespeare is baked into almost every piece of culture, tragedy story that we've ever seen on stage or on the TV screen. And so it's really like that. Star Wars is just kind of in the water of our common culture.
So there's good and bad, dark and light in the world, and we all get that.
Yeah.
What do we do with that?
Well, what we do with that,
we all
Marcus,
have a different definition of what the dark side is.
Yeah. In the Stoic philosophy, there's the Stoic philosopher known as Epictetus, and I believe this is his writing, that he said that we all have 2 levers in which to pull in life. 2 choices. We can either do this or we can do that. And the choice that we make is going to determine what kind of life we're going to live, whether or not we're going to be happy, whether or not we're going to indulge our wants, our vices, and our desires, or if we're going to choose to abstain from certain things. In Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Episode 5, that came out in 1980, Yoda says to Luke Skywalker that once you go down the dark path, forever will it consume your destiny. Really drawing on this same general idea that the choices we make are going to cascade down into other choices and confrontations with light and darkness in our lives. These are the things that I'm asking people to think about in Star Wars, looking beyond the lightsaber battles and the cool space fights, but actually saying, like, these movies are offering timeless wisdom, and if we applied that to our political situations, to our political conflicts, to our relationships, there's actually advice in here that can make us happier people.
Did you ever hear from George Lucas about this book?
Absolutely not, but I really hope he reads it. Star Wars is a really interesting piece of intellectual property in that they have always been very liberal with letting fans write about it and talk about how it impacts their lives in the world. Now, fan fiction, you can write a Star Wars piece of fiction and publish it anywhere on the internet. Nobody's going to stop you. You can also make Star Wars fan films using Star Wars music and go out and make movies and put them on YouTube. And they don't mind, because part of the fandom experience with Star Wars is engaging with the material. So, haven't heard from George Lucas, but I would love to.
The reference you have in there is Han Solo as Christ. What do you mean?
Well, Han Solo in The Force Awakens, this is episode 7, it came out in 2015. He represents kind of another character in the Star Wars lore who is a sacrificial figure who is willing to lay themselves down, their body on the line for their son. Christ dies for the sins of humanity. He does so even while saying, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." Han Solo, unfortunately, faces a very also sad and tragic death, but one that he accepted and did so with a lot of grace and willingness, because his son, known as Kylo Ren in these new movies, had fallen to the dark side, done horrible, horrible things. And Han Solo came to the conclusion that the only way to shock his son out of this evil track that he was on, to shock his moral sensibilities, was to say, "You need to kill someone, kill me." And he sacrificed himself in that movie, so spoiler alert to everyone who hasn't seen it, and he died. It's those kind of sacrifices, selfless love, that really require of people to question what kind of person they want to be. And it does work that way in that movie as well.
Do you think George Lucas's intent was to have these life lessons in his movies?
Absolutely.
Or were they pure entertainment?
Absolutely. George Lucas originally set out to do the original Star Wars trilogy, and he talks about this a lot as a critique of the Nixon administration and America in the post-Watergate world. When the prequels, 1999 to 2005, were coming out, he was banging the drum really hard about the War on Terror. Now, obviously, the War on Terror starts after the first prequel movie begins, 1999, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, but it all just lined up perfectly. He was warning us about a society where we give in to fear and a state, a government that promises to keep us safe at all costs, no matter what. And then we're attacked on 9/11 and we embark on this war on terror. And George Lucas was looking at his movies and talking to people and going, "This is what I was trying to warn you about." The movies are also a combination, particularly the Jedi religion, of taking the best of Eastern and Western philosophies, particularly the Stoic faith, the Stoic philosophy, the Christian faith, and then also the Tao from the East, and looking to Eastern philosophers for guides on how to live. And the Jedi are a synthesis of all of those different philosophies.
Stephen Kent, why are you at FreedomFest, the Libertarian Convention?
Because I'm deeply concerned about our society that has gotten to be hyper-focused on safety and freedom from fear and comfort above ideas such as being free to chart your own destiny. I think it's really important, particularly in conferences like this, to go out here and remind people that there is always going to be another fad that challenges our sensibilities, another crisis that challenges us and makes us want government to go and fix things and keep us safe, but it always comes at a cost. Star Wars is a story about that cost. Anakin Skywalker originally sets out to try to save people who he loves from dying, and he makes a deal with the devil. That deal leads him to become Darth Vader, suffering for the rest of his life inside a metallic suit, and also punishing the people of the galaxy for the choices that he made. This is something that we should also think about. How far are we willing to go to make things good for everybody? There will always be a cost. Darth Vader in Star Wars is my reminder of that.
What do you remember about your first experience or your first movie, your first Star Wars
I'm a
movie?
prequel kid, so my Star Wars memories are mostly tied to tape cassettes in the 90s. So Star Wars came back out with VHS special editions in 1996. So I wore those things out with my brother. And then when the prequels came out in 1999 and 2002, those were the first movies I was going to see with my friends. I have no memories of seeing the original Star Wars films in theaters. not one iota. So most of my Star Wars fandom has been sort of built in the 2000s onward.
Got to ask about the shirt that you have on. What is that?
Yeah, so this was a piece of art that I made for the book. I actually had How the Force Can Fix the World filled with a ton of original artwork by this guy who does sort of Catholic iconography. So he does a lot of religious paintings and art that you might see on stained glass in a cathedral. And he came to me and we did some Star Wars adaptations of Catholic iconography. And he put this together for me as a concept of the one person in the crowd who is willing to dissent and to say no. There's this famous photograph from the days of Nazi Germany where there's a bunch of Germans at a naval yard all sieg-heiling to Adolf Hitler as he's coming through town. And there's one guy in the crowd and his arms are crossed and he will not salute. His name is escaping me at this moment, but he did end up marrying a Jewish woman and dying in a camp himself. He stands today still as an example of the guy who was not willing to go along with the crowd. Star Wars very much is asking us to do these same things, to not go along with our programming, not march in line with others, but be willing to break apart from the group and do what's right. So be the one stormtrooper willing to take off your helmet and reclaim your personal identity.
Published by Hachette. How the Force Can Fix the World is the name of the book. Lessons on life, liberty, and happiness from a galaxy far, far away. Stephen Kent, thanks for spending some time with us here on BookTV.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.